I saw another statistic, Drew, that it's bigger than Netflix, HBO, ESPN, and Hulu. Like, we're talking a massive amount of people play video games, and that's a massive opportunity for you to invest. Hello and welcome to the Neighborhood Money Podcast, a video podcast here to talk about money, entrepreneurship, and helping you build a life you deserve. Drew, super pumped up for today because we're combining two of my favorite things, video games and investing and making money. Man, I couldn't be more excited to get this thing off the ground.
Very interesting episode from my point. I have not got too much into gaming, so I guess there's a hint we're going to be talking about gaming this episode. But the more I look into it, and I've seen it on the investing side, the gaming industry is huge and it's getting even bigger. There's even talks of it being in the Olympics, which is wild.
Yeah, it's quite massive. I mean, we'll get to it later in the episode, but you're right. The fact that gaming, which most people typically think of as like kids and, very nerdy type people doing it,
Yep.
The fact that this industry is going to grow to potentially be larger than the Olympics and even compete at the highest level with some of the largest sports industries around the world. So it's a really exciting topic. And Drew, there's a heck of a lot of opportunity for investing in this industry. And we can hopefully shed some light in this episode on what things you should start to think about if you're interested in getting into the gaming industry with your money.
Yeah, one of the things that comes into my mind right away is growing up. If you're on the video games, your parents will yell at you and say, hey, get off your video games and do something.
Yep.
You don't want to be sitting and playing video games the rest of your life, not making any money. Well, in this episode, I think we'll go through some areas where it shows that you actually can make significant amount of money in the gaming industry, even playing video games.
Right. I mean, you look some of the major streamers that are raking in multiple $1 million per year just playing one specific video game. It's actually quite fascinating that that's the world we live in and pretty cool. Let's start out with a little bit of history, maybe some gaming foundation for those listeners that do just see video games as, the old Pong or, the nerdy of the nerdiest going and sitting in a dark room in the basement playing games. So gaming obviously started a long time ago. So I actually started in the 50s, and I didn't know that until we started researching for this episode. But it started in the 50s with very simplified games. Pong came out in 72. I think everyone's familiar with Pong.
Yep.
And then you had the golden ages of the arcades in the 70s, the console wars in the 80s and 90s, which was really at the very minimum is the competition between home gaming consoles, specifically between Nintendo and Sega. And so that really brought gaming into the home. It was traditionally just in the arcades before then. In the 90s, gaming really started to grow. You saw 3D graphics come into play. And then in the 2000s up into today, we're kind of in the second phase of the console war between Sony and Microsoft. And, the graphics compete with almost movie type quality. It's quite amazing how far the gaming industry has come from the 50s now to today, where you're seeing, the big players in the gaming market being Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft.
Watching some of the, I would say just say football or hockey, like the sports video games, I'll actually see my nephew playing them and I almost think it's TV, it's live. And that's how good the graphics have got. I saw when Tom Brady ended up retiring this year, they showed the first time he was in a Madden game till now, and it was the first one was all pixelated. You couldn't even make it out it was him, and now it looks like a picture of him.
For very good reasons why the gaming industry is now competing with things like the movie industry. Drew, actually, a really interesting statistic that I found is that, like I said, most people don't think a lot of people play video games. Well, that's actually not true. So there's almost 8 billion people in this world. 3.2 billion people consider themselves gamers. So that's over 40% of people on the earth actually play video games. And the average age of a video gamer is 35.
That's interesting. That kind of goes that adage of only younger kids play it. But I mean, really everybody up into their older ages. So the 35-year-olds are probably, in that really beginning stage of when video games got really big and they've liked them so much that they've wanted to continue going forward with them.
And the reason that I brought that up is because when you think about investing or where to put your money, you don't really want to necessarily put it into a market that might just be teenagers. Sure, that can be profitable, but really providing those statistics shows you that, hey, this is a lot larger than just teens and kids playing video games. It's, globally massive. It's across any age group, it's across any demographic, and it just continues to grow and is projected to grow at an enormous pace. But Drew, one more thing before we actually get into the gaming industry
Mm-hmm.
is, like I said a little bit earlier, it really started out massively in the arcades. It got brought home in the home consoles. And now, we're seeing a huge shift in gaming where before it used to be such a barrier getting in because a lot of these consoles and just TVs technologies costed so much money that it really
Yeah.
was a barrier for a lot of people. But now we're moving more towards cloud gaming. Everyone's familiar with mobile gaming. Everyone has basically a computer in their
Yep.
pocket, and it's making gaming in general very accessible for the masses.
With the accessibility is a huge part of it. And that's just how our technology, I think, has moved forward. But if you want to get a video game in your house that was, say, it was just like a Simpsons game or one that was at the arcade, I'm sure you're paying you're paying thousands of dollars for it. Now you could get it for a couple $100, obviously get a little bit more expensive. But as you're talking, the games are getting cheaper for more content, I would have to say, or better quality. And there's soon to be a lot more of the streaming games where you might have the Netflix of video games, just being able to click into it and pick any game you want. And the accessibility will be from anywhere. So if you don't have to pack up your Xbox or your PlayStation when you're on vacation. If you have like your computer, or maybe you have
Right.
like a controller that hooks into your TV, you'd be able to log in and play it wherever you want.
They actually already have that. It's actually pretty cool. So I forget what Xbox calls it, but I think it's called like cloud gaming. But you can actually play Xbox games on your phone or computer, and it's pretty fascinating that you can start streaming games. Now there's a lot of uphill battles from a technological standpoint to make that seamless, like there is in consoles. But we won't go into the nitty gritty details of that because that's really beyond the episode. And I'm just getting super excited because obviously I'm pretty passionate about this industry. What does the gaming industry actually look like? We talked a little bit about how many people play video games, but let's talk about some dollars. Let's see how much money actually is in the gaming industry.
Yeah, being a personal finance podcast, you'd think gaming would be one of the last things that are on here, but I'm going to read a couple statistics here and showing how much monetary opportunity that you would see actually in the gaming industry. So, from one of the statistics I saw was in 2020 the gaming industry generated 155 billion with a B in revenue.
Yeah, that's wild.
By 2025, analysts predict the industry will be greater than 260 billion in revenue, and that's with the B again. So there is so much money inflowing into the gaming industry, it's crazy. And it's not just video games, it's everything that goes along with it, which we'll talk about a little bit further in this episode. Something else I would like to, for numbers wise, that makes it really crazy to put it in perspective is the video game sector is larger than the movie and music industries combined.
I saw another statistic, Drew, that it's bigger than Netflix, HBO, ESPN, and Hulu. Like, we're talking a massive amount of people play video games, and that's a massive opportunity for you to invest.
Yeah, when you're looking at video games, is you got to stop up and get off because you can't make any money. There, these or these benchmarks that we just showed you are amazing. That say the music and the movie industry that's been around for ages is now less than the gaming industry in just a matter of years.
Not just in revenue, we're talking gaming provides a ton of different jobs.
Ton of them, and whether it be on the developer side or as we talk a little bit further, there's actually a construction side that we can even,
Right.
talk about that it can go towards. The gaming industry generates 40.8 billion in tax revenue to federal, state, and local governments. Employment right there is crazy, and I think it supports nearly 1.8 million jobs. Not only is a video games maybe fun or maybe it's lucrative, but it's also stable and you can find employment in this industry.
I think it's really hard for a lot of people to kind of grasp that this is actually a viable industry and it's not just wasted time, like we've kind of talked about a little bit. But the way I've looked at it is it's pretty synonymous to movies. So if you think about the history of movies, the place to go was the movie theater because your home just one, you either couldn't afford it or the technology available just wasn't as good. And then that kind of progressed to now you have very nice stuff at home. But now you're moving more towards streaming and you're getting away from physical media. And the gaming industry is following a very similar pathway. And I think they're catching up pretty quickly.
I think an interesting thing too with this gaming industry is like how cyclical it kind of was in the format. I'll say so when it first came out, you were kind of by yourself on maybe a TV or like at an arcade, and then arcades became big,
Yeah.
so it became a place to go in a community, and you made a bunch of friends at the arcade.
Right.
And then
Yep.
as they came cheaper to be at home, you started getting away from communicating with people. And now it's come back into a big arcade type of feel where you can connect with people anywhere in the world and have friends virtually pretty much. And, even though you're sitting in your home, you're talking to hundreds of people a day.
It's basically a social ecosystem at the end of the day. I know, Drew, when we were in high school, we used to come home from athletics and we would play probably like five, six, seven of us would hop on Call of Duty specifically. And I think it was less so how fun the game was and more so how fun it was just to hang out in this like virtual environment and talk to each other and play a game all together.
I have to agree with that 100%. I'm not a huge video game guy anymore, but in high school and in college, I would pretty much play video games when I was around people. So it was a way for me to hang out or connect with people. But just going back to when we were younger, played Call of Duty at our home with our 7, 6, 7, 8 guys, whatever it was. I just remember we would put cardboard up on the screen because it'd be divided
Yeah.
so you couldn't see it. And then you'd always have that one person that kept peeking over at your screen and you just
Right.
wanted to sock them right in the mouth. But
Yeah.
those are always
Yeah,
very fun.
those are good intense times. Some of the fondest memories. But I think that's important to talk about, right? Is the fact that people our age, older, younger, it doesn't really matter. Like gaming was a huge part of their upbringing, and that's why it's leading in them into continuing to play games over the course of their entire life. And I think that's another reason why the gaming industry, one's not going away, but the fact that it is growing to such a level and is going to continue to grow in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Drew, one more thing though on the social aspect is you're totally right. It went from arcades to online, and now thinking about like the metaverse and how VR and AR, augmented reality and virtual reality, how that's going to bring people even closer in a virtual context. And gaming is going to be a huge part of that.
Yeah. And to show how much support's behind that, back in 2014, Apple bought Oculus. So pretty much those goggles you constantly see on people when they're in the VR. They bought that for $2 billion. That was back in 2014, which is wild.
Yeah, a massive amount of money.
And they probably got a steal of a deal on that when you're looking at it now. I mean, I just, following stocks, Microsoft just they bought Activision Blizzard, which was a big gaming like Call of Duty, I believe, made. Any other big names
Yep.
you can think of, Cav?
Yeah, that's the biggest one. I mean, they've got some other titles.
Yeah, they bought that for all cash transaction for $95 a share, and I think that was valued at I actually have to look that one up again, $68 billion, and this was just within the last couple of months. So Microsoft, that's already in the console game, is really trying to go out and buy the games that are then going to be going into esports, but there's some big money getting put behind gaming.
We're definitely seeing a consolidation, I would say, in the gaming industry where you used to have Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, and then you would have these other developers and publishers. But now you're really seeing Microsoft or Sony buying out these publishers and developers, so that they can bring them under their ecosystem, so that can drive sales on consoles, that can provide exclusive content to their specific company. And Drew, it's just a natural cycle of business, but the consolidation is going to have a huge factor going forward, which at the end of the day is probably not the best thing from a consumer standpoint, because when you get into the consolidation phase, all of a sudden now competition becomes less and less. And really the only, or I should say, the person that gets hurt the most when there's less competition
Mhm.
is going to be the end consumer. So whether that's not as fun games, or poor quality content, or whatever it might be,
Yep.
that could be a real downfall of it.
One of our episodes that are coming up with Tyson, we after the episode we found out Tyson's quite the gamer, and we were talking a bit, and that was one of the things he talked about too. Is with this consolidation, they want to get more and more information out of the user, and then if they start putting advertisements or sponsorships, all these streaming services or these games that you buy, it's either there's going to be banners constantly around ruining the game, or they don't want to create anything creative because they know what makes money and they want to push anything that towards that fits in that little box. So um, consolidation, even though there's a lot of money going in towards it, as far as the end user for the video games, it can cause some havoc, or I don't know what you want to, or madness. I don't know what you want to call
Yeah,
it.
I mean, for sure, for sure. But with consolidation, you also can find some good opportunities when you think about investing. If you can find those companies that potentially might get consolidated into like a Microsoft or a Sony, they're going to have big jumps in how they're valued after that consolidation. So, Drew, I think that kind of naturally segues us into, that was the gaming industry. Obviously, so high level, we could never capture everything in this conversation.
No,
If we wanted to do an actual deep dive into the gaming industry, it would take many episodes and many hours. But how do we, as investors, as money nerds, how do we start looking at the gaming industry from an investing standpoint?
so you just kind of have to break it down by either sectors of the gaming industry or types of investing. But the most common one that you'd think about would be stocks.
Right.
So when you're looking into stocks, it comes into the thought of, do you want to invest in a more stable company like a Microsoft that's, keeps growing? Or do you want to start with maybe some small developer company? It might be a little bit more risky. But I mean, really, the industry looking at investing long term, if we're just talking stock wise, it's not just the video games. You can think about, say, like Nvidia, they make chips for these computers and these consoles. You can think about accessories, whether it's headphones
Right.
um, or mouses, keyboards,
Microphones, lights,
microphones.
stuff like that. Yep.
So it's not just gaming when you think about it. You have to think of all the other jobs and companies that benefit from this industry growing.
It's going to have such a ripple effect throughout basically everything. Even a couple of things that you didn't touch on are going to be things, just think about general advertisements. I know G Fuel is a huge gaming advertiser, and that's a drink, right? It's an energy drink. And things like that. And I actually don't even know if G Fuel is public or not, but just as an example, there's going to be energy drink. Rockstar, great example. Or Rockstar and Red Bull, great examples. Like, they both sponsor video game related stuff, whether it's esports or uh, in actual video games. But those types of companies are going to grow along with the industry, and it's going to be a really good opportunity.
I mean, I guess gaming fuel or, just beverages in general is something that didn't come to my mind right away. But if you're looking at Monster, that's a publicly traded company, or you look
Right.
at Rockstar, I think they're owned by Coca Cola, another public company. So you can actually see if you start watching and you saw a trend of some, beverages that are doing very, very well, you could potentially go back into that stock and see the benefits of it.
Another area, Drew, that I think is fascinating, we talked about before we hopped on here to actually record the podcast, is the esports scene. Uh, I love esports. I don't actually watch it, but I love the content or the context of it, or the concept of esports. But at the at its basic level, it is just playing games competitively for an audience. So you can kind of think of esports as like you would the NFL, the MLB, NBA, NHL, things like that,
Mhm.
where it's an ecosystem. It's a league of professional video game players in whatever video game they're actually playing, and it's a league that's built around that. But Drew, I think that there's going to be a real opportunity because esports itself is going to just balloon. Uh, we mentioned a little earlier in the episode, maybe even in the intro, I forget now, but the fact that esports has a strong potential to be bigger than the Olympics and right in par with those worldwide sports.
Yeah, I even want to say some of the people in esports are making more than, say, NHL players. Probably, but maybe not basketball or baseball, but I bet there's some NFL players that they make more money than, which is crazy to think about because you'll see like they have stadiums for these people. They'll be sitting on their computers. Uh, Down in the middle of the stadium with big screens all around, and people sit and watch them. And it's really, I mean, they're really talented. There's even broadcasting on TV for these, and to see these people work and they do their training. But those players, if you want to become one of these professional video game players, you can be making millions of dollars a year just by
Right.
sitting on a chair and moving your fingers pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's downplaying it to a massive extent, right? They're very
Absolutely.
talented in what they do,
Extremely.
uh, but as an investor, again, looking for those opportunities that are going to align with those scenes, whether it's the type of sponsorships that are going into esports, the actual game, the company, so
Mhm.
Activision, EA Sports, those big companies that are making these games that are on the esports scenes are going to very much benefit from esports. And even in addition to that, if opportunities arise that you can actually invest in an esports team, whether it's a crowd-funded team or not, those types of things may exist coming into the near future.
And for a point I'm going to make here, it's not necessarily for, say, like the normal retail trader, the everyday Joe, but just to show that there is some more backing once again, is the Robert Kraft of I believe Kraft and Heinz, but owns the Patriots as well. He actually bought into an esports team, so he's an owner of an esports team. So you're going to start seeing these esports like NFL or something where you have divisions and you have which you probably already do, but then they play each other and then there's championships. And when they're broadcasted, there's advertising all behind it, which is crazy. And then as this gets, being sports, something that's huge right now too is now gambling on it. As gambling is becoming more and more legal in more and more states, you're starting to see like Caesars, are they I don't think they're part of MGM, but like MGM and all that, they're getting huge into esports where they are have their betting lines. They want to start building stadiums. So when I was talking about maybe construction jobs in gaming, they are literally building stadiums just for these gamers off of casinos.
Probably not too long from now, we're going to see esports be a major scene in the sports area. I mean, ESPN already airs esports. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes forward. And I think a really good opportunity here, trying to get in. It's maybe not the early stages of it, but you're still not where there's mass adoption. So there's some room for opportunity. Drew, I think, one more thing that if people should think about in the long-term investing when it comes to gaming is the metaverse,
Mm-hmm.
right? We've talked a little bit about the metaverse in past episodes, but the metaverse really opens up so many opportunities because one, it hasn't even been really created or solidified. Like there's just so much room for improvement, and things that are going to be huge haven't even been thought of yet. But gaming in the metaverse is going to be a really big opportunity, specifically when you start thinking about using crypto and NFTs.
If I could parallel it with anything, if you've ever heard of freemium games, I can't remember if you talked about a little bit earlier in the
Yeah.
episode,
Yep.
but they're free to play. But if you want to have add-ons or buy more land, you have to spend your US dollars or whatever fiat money you have. And you go and you can buy
Yep.
those outfits or apparel or lands or vehicles, whatever it may be. But once that money's in there, it's already gone. So like that was like the
Right.
freemium. These crypto ones, it's really interesting because not only can you spend money, but you can also sell that stuff in the metaverse, which it
Right.
seems really weird. So right now with these freemium ones, once the money's in there, you're never seeing it ever again. With the way
Right.
crypto's set up is once your money's in there, it's just circulating and you always have a chance to potentially make it back. It could be for a loss. it could be for nothing, but you can also make money if it was something that was very desired in the metaverse.
In the early stages of gaming, I think you're right. It's going to probably be focused on skins and being able to sell skins. And so maybe you got a rare drop and then a year later you're like, "Hey, I'm going to sell this cuz it appreciated by 15, 20, 50%, whatever it might be."
Hmm.
Like I think that's a big opportunity. But Drew, one of the really cool things right that's happening right now in the metaverse is the fact it's horseback riding, right? We talked about this again before the episode, but right now you have the ability to basically be in a virtual horseback ecosystem. So that means you can buy horses, you can breed horses, you can sell the horses, and then you can actually race them.
This is by no means financial advice or like pumping any product, but I stumbled across one of these the other day. It was called Zed Run, ZED space RUN, and I was just looking for NFTs and I came across horse and I thought, oh, look kind of cool, and I just decided to buy it. And I'm like, oh, I don't see it anywhere. And as I looked more into this, that was actually the horse industry, which is wild. So you can buy your horse. You can have your own stable, so you can have multiple horses in your stable. If you have a really good horse, you can breed them. So there's a cost to that. You can race your horse and win tournaments, and you can like pretty much rent out your horse too. So it's
Right.
really and there's gambling on it too. So you can kind of gamble
Yep.
on like the horse racing
Yeah.
side of it. So
Right.
the fact that you can random play video games, but it actually has value. Well, value what people think has behind it. Uh,
Yep.
you could be sitting there playing video games, and as long as your horse is doing well, then you could be making money just by playing video games. So it's pretty cool.
Drew, one question because I am a big time index fund guy. I'm a big time ETF guy. Do you know if there's any type of video game type index funds or ETFs?
As far as ETFs, I think there's a few out there. There's one with the ticker Hero, HERO, and it's filled up with like the Activisions, the Logitechs, has like Roblox in there. So there's probably 20 companies focused in the gaming industry. So I even think year year over year, like the gaming industry is like almost up like 14% or something like that. So it's kind of interesting too that now that not only is there stocks, but if you wanted to be that long term investor and being less risky and have a more diverse portfolio, there are such ETFs. There's probably more than just that hero one, but that's one that comes to the top of my mind.
Just another opportunity that you might think about if you want to invest into the gaming industry. I think the last segment or whatever we want to call it for this episode is how do people make money playing video games? I think that's a really interesting topic uh, that we should talk about because it's a real option now for a lot of people to make money. And if you're good, to make a massive amount of money.
Yeah, this could be a little side hustle too, or if you want to get like slowly get into the industry, there are a bunch of ways to do it. Like one thing off the top of my mind is if say you're one of these 35-year-olds that's like the main demographic for video games, you might have old consoles or old games, and you could actually they've now became vintage and more collectible, so you could
Right.
actually sell those for a small profit, and maybe if you hold on to long enough they're even worth even more. So I think right at the bat, just something really easy that you might have at your house would be collectibles and vintage games that you could sell.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, that kind of gets into the long-term investing too. Like you could potentially, there's definitely a market to go out there and find vintage video games and buy and hold and sell them later down the line for a profit. Like that exists. It's a very niche market. It's a very complex market to get into because when you think about video games, it's not just the video game, it's the rarity of the video game, it's the quality of the video game, if it's factory sealed or not. And there's a lot of scams out there too. And so that's a really hard thing to get into. But yeah, I think you're totally right. If you have a video game collection, or maybe it's just a small gathering of video games throughout your childhood, and if you don't want them, it's a pretty good opportunity to sell and to make some extra cash. I think one of the things that I am very fascinated by when it comes to the gaming industry is streaming.
Mhm.
Streaming's massive. It's very hard to get into, but the fact that you can, if you're interested in video games and if you play video games, if you just record yourself do it, and you have to have the skill of interacting with an audience, but it's an opportunity to actually make some money
Mhm.
playing video games in front of an audience.
Yeah, just as YouTube content or podcasts, this is in that same realm, but for video games, it's like a lower level esports, pretty much, where people can pay
Right.
to watch you play video games and listen to your commentary. I think that tends to be a huge part of a lot of these Twitch streamers. Is some people's commentary and entertainment value is great, and that's where a lot of their value can come from. So you don't even have to be the best.
And not even streaming video games. If you want to be like a video game news reporter, or if you want to just deep dive into a specific video game and just make videos, like that's all possibilities as a side hustle. And people do it as a full time job.
And some other side hustles we've talked about that, like those gig works in the past episodes. So if you were a good at coding or you're good at design, there's gig work for you to say you went onto a Fiverr or an Upwork and you said, I can design characters for your game, or I can design your logo for your game, or I can help build you a game. So there's all that little gig work stuff where if you have the knowledge and the talent to do it, and it only takes you maybe an hour or a day to do it, you could probably, rack up, a couple $100 a week just by doing something you already know what to do. That's not too difficult, and somebody else doesn't, and you can take advantage of that in the marketplace. So I think that's a really cool one. If you were ever if you have a drop shipping company or you wanted to sell stuff online or even at a retail store, like if you started a storefront, that wouldn't be much of a side hustle. But if you had just a random online store, you could potentially sell accessories, whether it be cool keyboards or cool headsets, or you could be, a wholesaler for these type of products as well. There's also stuff as merchandise, if it's mugs or T-shirts, or it's really what you can sell is pretty much endless, which is pretty cool. That it could be something on the side where you don't have to put a lot of time into, and if you find the right niche, it could be fairly lucrative for you.
To summarize this entire episode is the fact that the gaming industry is massive. It's continuing to grow at a pretty rapid pace, and there's a ton of possibilities, whether it's investing or whether it's finding a side hustle. If gaming is your interest, there's a lot of opportunities out there for you to get involved, to make some money. But as always, when you are trying to invest, and like Drew said, we're not this isn't financial advice. We're not financial advisors, but there's always risk when investing your money. So just be aware of that. Make sure you do your due diligence, and make sure that what you're investing in, you truly believe in, and you've spent the time to fully understand it. Video game industry obviously is massive. We've said that a ton of times
Mhm.
throughout this entire episode. A lot of opportunities for people to get involved, a lot of opportunities for people to invest or to create a side hustle or a full-time job, but just so much out there when you think about the video game industry. And a really fun conversation for me because, like I said, these are my two passions: gaming and money
Mhm.
and investing. But Drew, what would you say your main takeaway is from this episode?
My main takeaway is, don't think of video games as just playing video games by yourself in the basement. The video game industry is vast, and there's becoming more and more opportunities out there. So the biggest takeaway is, if you were looking at investing long term in the gaming industry or short term side hustles, just remember that you don't have to necessarily know how to play a video game to be in the industry. You can be a facilitator or a subcontractor for so many parts of the video game industry. And I just would like people to realize that there's more to the industry than just playing a video game by yourself in the basement.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would second that. I think that's my main takeaway is the fact that this gaming industry is so vast and there's going to be so much opportunity to get involved, whether that's actually playing games or investing. And I think it's just something that to keep on your radar and to consider when you think about your long-term planning, whether that's individual stocks, ETFs, looking into the crypto metaverse space, or building up a side hustle and trying to make a little extra money from something that you love, if that's the case. But yeah, pretty fascinating, pretty interesting where this space is going.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of put it into a little bit of perspective, a lot of these index funds that you go into, you might not know anything that's part of these index funds and you still invest in them. The gaming industry, it doesn't have to be scary for like you to think
Right.
about it. You don't have to know everything about video games to invest into it. You just have to kind of know the concept that the video game industry is here to stay and that there's opportunities out there.
So, what the heck is esports? Well, it's a type of spectator sport where people watch gamers play at the highest levels. In 2021 alone, esports brought in $1 billion and is projected to bring in $1.6 billion by the end of 2024. This is obviously catching the eyes of major video game companies. Actually, Microsoft is set to acquire Activision Blizzard for a whopping $68.7 billion. The largest esports companies like Activision Blizzard, Tencent Holding, Take-Two Interactive, Electronics Arts, and Zynga are all poised to lead the charge into the fast-growing global esports world. This market has a massive opportunity for future profits. If esports isn't something you've considered to put into your investment portfolio, maybe now is a really good time to learn more about it and consider it. And that's this week's Money Minute. This week, I'm sure the listeners could tell, but I am slowly losing my voice through this whole episode. And actually, for what's going on in the neighborhood this week, we had to push this recording back because I woke up yesterday. So typically we record on Wednesdays, and I woke up Wednesday morning with no voice at all, and it slowly came back throughout the day. And I'm like, great. So we pushed it to Thursday. I woke up this morning again, no voice. And as you can probably tell, it is slowly dwindling and probably will be gone before we're done recording.
When Cavan first came on, it was like my right away. I'm like, you are gonna have a great podcast video voice. I said you should be sick more often. But I think if you're listening to this without video, just audio, I think you're gonna be like, who's that sexy guy talking with the deep voice?
You know what it reminds me of is Phoebe Buffay in the show Friends when she's sick and she sings and she calls it her sexy voice, and then she like performs and people love it, and then all of a sudden she like gets healthy and it's gone, and then she like tries to make herself sick again. That's exactly how I feel right
You're
now.
gonna get so many comments on this video and be like, Cavan, you got to get the sexy voice back. Get the Phoebe voice.
Well, I can't promise that I'm going to have a low voice like this each and every week because I hope I don't, because it's not fun.
But yeah, over here in my neighborhood, currently still in Florida, came over to the Cape Coral area, but
Different
a
background.
different background. I could go outside, but I have some family out there, so I thought I could sneak away into
Nice.
bedroom. But the cool and the great news is my now just I think today is 4 months old, and he's starting to giggle. So these are
Yeah, I saw it. You sent a video over to me. That's
yeah,
awesome.
they're the first couple giggles, so they're like super cute. I took a video
Yeah.
of it. Maybe even I can send the video over to Cav and we can find a way to sneak it into this episode. But if not, I have got to say I took a video of it and I've watched it quite a few times, and it's really cute to see
Yeah.
like a baby grow and then start hearing them laugh and giggle, and it's pretty amazing.
When you sent it over, where you snapped it over to me, I started laughing because I feel like when you hear a baby giggle, you just can't not laugh. But the best part is your mom and dad are in the background, I think,
Yep.
and they're like, is he laughing? And then your dad was like, yeah, he's giggling or something like that.
That was them. So I think that's like the coolest thing that's happening over in my neighborhood today is got a 4 month old that's starting to giggle.
How fun. That's pretty awesome.
That wraps up another week of the Neighborhood Money podcast. A very interesting episode on gaming. The gaming industry is becoming very vast and huge, and the opportunities to make it part of your personal finance portfolio is endless. And I hope this episode has showed that there's more to gaming than you initially thought, and there's might be more that we missed, but we wanted to come out here and show you little bit of the gaming industry and where it's going. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. If there's any other episodes or content that you guys want, please let us know. We'd love to go over some more episodes, anything that you want to hear related to personal finance or entrepreneurship. So with all that said, we want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week in the neighborhood.